Better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent suffer. Sir William Blackstone, English jurist and justice. All right. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Do me a favor, folks. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folk out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. All right. Today, we are continuing this series on immigration. Now, if you're just tuning in, if you haven't caught the other two episodes, this is the third part in whatever series. I haven't really determined how far I'm going to take it. And all I'm doing is going through and saying, all right, let's just pick an element of the conversation on immigration and let's just dig into it a little bit. And I'm going to learn some stuff or maybe remember some stuff, as we will see today, because there are some things that when I was doing the research for today's show, I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Right. So either we're going to learn new stuff or we're going to remember old stuff that we've forgotten. At any rate, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about deportation. That's all the big news, right? Trump's talking about deporting people. He's going to deport somewhere between 11 and 16 million people. That's his big priority. He's going to declare an emergency order and we're going to use the military and it's going to be great. We're going to get rid of all these terrible people that are just, that came across the border and didn't ask permission, because that's what America does. We're like, oh, you didn't ask permission? Get the hell out, right? Like that's who we are, right? Okay, well, we'll see. This would be Trump's second go, as you definitely know. I don't really have to tell you. But I want to point out that this is not new. Trump actually, this was part of his first campaign promise when he ran back in 2015, 2016. So let's take a look at an interview he did on CNN, just a clip, and we're going to hear what he had to say back in 2015. And then we will go from there and we'll just continue on this conversation. We're going to dig in to deporting immigrants.
On this one point, though, of deporting 11 million people, even Marco Rubio today said this morning it can't be done.
What do you mean, even Marco Rubio? Marco Rubio is in favor of amnesty. He was a member of the Gang of Eight. He was always in favor of amnesty. He was in favor of people pouring into the country. Then what happened is when people found that out, he sank like a rock in the water.
Well, he says he's for anyone with a criminal record, people like that.
Now he's saying things different,
which is something that you would support.
He's much.
I just want to point out, didn't Trump recently tap Marco Rubio to be part of his team? He was like, yo, Marco Rubio, why don't you come be on my administration staff? Throwing that out there, just mentioning it, just so we all remember.
Much different now than he was in the past, okay? He's much different. Now, as far as criminal, they're going to be out so fast. If I win, we have tremendous problems. I just gave you an article where an illegal alien ran over today in Texas. A policeman 3 times just kept running him over. Look, we have problems. You have Kate in San Francisco. You have the veteran soldier, this wonderful woman who was 66 years old, a retired vet, who was raped, sodomized, and killed by an illegal alien.
So I want to point out here that he's highlighting specific tragedies. And that's normal, right? Like politicians, when they're talking, they're not going to come out and be like, hey, here's all the facts and data and charts and numbers. I mean, they'll do some of that too. But it pulls at our heartstrings a little bit more when they mention somebody by name or, a specific instance, right? Because we're like, oh man, a police officer got ran over like 3 times. And I'm sure a lot of people were hearing that and they were like, yeah, we totally need to get all these illegal immigrants out, which is not too much different from his rhetoric today, where you'll hear him go, oh, Laken Riley, we got to, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm not trivializing the deaths of people, but what I am doing is saying that his rhetoric today is not much different than his rhetoric the first time he ran. Follows a very similar pattern, one that we see with politicians all the time. Let's continue watching.
Or as they would say, an illegal immigrant. And this happened 3 weeks ago in California, but it's happening all over. It's a big problem. Crime is a big problem. You also have wonderful people here.
But so
they
that's
came
my
in,
point.
excuse me, they came in illegally. They are here illegally.
But
We have
how
to
would you
something.
do the logistics of it? How would you do the
Two things.
logistics?
First of
Okay.
all,
How do you take
it's all a
11 million
package.
people and make
Fine,
them leave?
Fine, you'll do it.
Okay, so she just asked him, how do you take 11 million people and make them leave? Which is wild because we're still talking today about 11 million people. He never delivered on that campaign promise. Just want to point that out. Like, it's literally the same number. We're talking about 11. I mean, they might, depending on your source, you might hear like 16 million, you might hear 20 million, but it's in the 11 to 16 to 20 million range, depending on who is actually doing the talking. And that's the same number that was floated around back in 2015, 2016, when he was talking about it. So what happened? Well, I don't know.
It's all a package. Number one, we're going to build a wall. We're going to have people come
Well,
into the
that's the people
country.
not coming-
I agree,
okay.
but let's go through it. We're going to build a wall. It's going to be a real wall. It's going to be a wall that's powerful and that people aren't going to be going under or up or around or anything else. It's going to be a real wall. And we're going to have a door in the wall. People are going to come into the country legally. And we're going to hopefully get a lot of people coming in, and they're all going to come in legally. We're going to get rid of the bad ones because we have some really bad ones in here right now. And you know that gang members in LA, you look at some of these gangs, they're 100% illegal immigrants. They're going to be gone, okay? And they're going to be gone fast. And they're not going to be in our prisons for us to take care of them. Our prisons are bursting with illegals right now.
What about
Okay, so consider so far what he said. He's like, we're going to build a wall because we got to keep people out. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go after people that are violent criminals. And we're going to get rid of these guys because these guys are, bad hombres. We got to get rid of them. They're violent criminals. And I actually have no objection with that. But we're just kind of going through old Trump. I mean, he's still old, but, back in the past Trump.
those the law-abiding
Sure.
majority? That's
Now
the big
you have people
question.
that came in illegally,
Yes.
and they're called illegal immigrants, and they're here illegally. They're going to have to go, and they're going to have to come back in legally.
Okay, so he's got three groups of people. Basically, those that want to come in, we're going to put up a wall. Those that are already here and are violent criminals, we're going to get rid of those. Then there are people that are here. They're not violent criminals. Presumably, the biggest crime that they have committed was not coming here through a legal process. That's their biggest crime. And he said, yep, you got to go and start over. Okay. So that was his campaign promise. And did he deliver? Well, as it turns out, not so much. So let's take a look here. Let's go back to, oops, where do we want to go here? There we are. All right. So let's move this. There we go on the screen. What's Donald Trump's 10-point immigration plan? This comes from PBS back in September of 2016. We'll zoom it in. So we'll just kind of go through quickly here. His 10-point plan: build a wall, end, catch, and release, create a deportation task force and focus on criminals in the country illegally, defund sanctuary cities, cancel President Obama's executive actions, extreme vetting, block immigration from some nations, force other countries to take back those whom the U.S. wants to deport, get biometric visa tracking system fully in place, strengthen E-Verify, block jobs for the undocumented, limit legal immigration, lower it to quote unquote historical norms, end quote, and set new caps. So that was the basis of his 10-point plan. According to AP, and this comes to you from August of 2023, Trump delivered on some big 2016 promises, but others unmet. So let's go down here to my highlighted section. While Mexico never did pay for the big, quote, big, beautiful wall, end quote, Trump pledged to build along the 2,000-mile southern border, the signature promise of his 2016 campaign. the project is now underway. So in 2020, 4 years after he was elected, the project is now underway with 450 miles expected to be completed by the end of December. This was in September. Only a sliver of that, however, just 4 miles, has been built along stretches where no barrier stood before. So they had about 4 miles of brand new wall by 2020. That was his camp. And remember, now I do remember the wall was a bit, that was practically his rally cry. We're going to build a wall. Mexico's going to pay for it. And they never did pay for it. They really didn't even build it because even 4 years later, he only had like a few miles built of brand new wall. Let's see what. And Trump has successfully succeeded in fundamentally transforming the nation's immigration system despite resistance from the courts and little cooperation from Congress. It's interesting because he did start out with a Republican Congress. Using more than 400 executive actions, according to a recent analysis by the Nonpartisan Migration Policy Institute, Trump has effectively shut down the asylum system at the southwest border and slashed refugee admissions. At the same time, Trump has imposed a slew of new restrictions on legal immigration, with the pandemic spurring many more. That would be Title 42, if you remember. With so few visas being processed and immigration fees collected, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services has all but run out of money and is about to furlough large swaths of its workforce. I mean, that kind of sounds exciting. Like you take any department and you say, hey, we gotta furlough some people. We gotta let some people go. Well, as a libertarian, that's music to my ears right there. But getting back to the point here, he didn't deliver on his major campaign promises. And they were big ones, just like they are now. And so the question is, what makes now any different than back then? Right? Like he won his election. He won it with a Republican Congress, just like he has today. And then he made all these promises. And then it says here that like Congress wasn't even cooperative. Why weren't they cooperative? Now, maybe the after the midterms, Congress wasn't very cooperative. But what happened before midterms? In 2 years, what did he do? Why didn't he focus on those campaign promises? I don't know. I like this from Grok. Grok, as you know, or hopefully you know, is the AI that you can ask a bazillion questions and have it draw cool pictures for you, like the one I did for the thumbnail. And I asked it, I said, all right, well, I said, did Donald Trump deport millions of immigrants during his first presidency? So here's what Grok said. And Grok was not around, by the way, when Donald Trump was in his first presidency. Donald Trump did not deport millions of immigrants during his first presidency. While he promised extensive deportations, the actual number of deportations under his administration from 2017 to 2021 was significantly lower than the millions he pledged, according to various sources. Numbers. During Trump's term, there were approximately 935,089 deportations. Okay. So he had under a million deportations. Remember, we just heard him say 11 million. He's got a plan for 11 million people. And he got like 10% of that. I suppose it's not too bad if you think about it. Presidents often over promise and under deliver. So I suppose 10%, you could argue and say, hey, you know what? Considering the reality of the situation, that's not so bad. Let's see. However, it goes on to say, which is less than the number under previous administrations like Obama and Clinton. Oh, wah, wah. So like Democrats actually deported more people than the Republican. Point that out, folks. Historically, or at least with these three. I don't know about all the presidents, but at least for these three major presidents in my lifetime, right? Obama, Clinton, they both had more deportations than Donald Trump, who explicitly ran on deporting people. That was, and got a Republican Congress. Point that out. For instance, the Obama administration often referred to as having led to the title deporter in chief. Like Obama deported so many, they called him deporter in chief. Nobody called that of Trump, who actually ran on it. Weird, huh? All right. Context of deportations. Trump's administration did increase the focus on interior enforcement, but faced several challenges, including resistance from sanctuary cities and states. I wonder if that could happen again today. You should go look up all the governors that are getting together. They're mostly blue state. No, they're all blue state governors right now, and they're getting together, and they're kind of coming out. What do they call it? Governors of, I can't remember. There's a term for it now, and I don't remember. But what they're doing is they're getting together and they're saying, "Hey, we want to make sure that we retain autonomy as a state, so we should get together and trade notes." And they're claiming that it's not about Trump, but then in other interviews and stuff like that, you'll hear them when they reference like things that they want to protect, it's always about Trump. So they're getting together to oppose Trump, and they're hoping that some Republican governors will get on board, but I doubt it. Right, anyway, so the majority of deportations were of people apprehended at or near the border rather than from the interior of the country, which aligns more with border enforcement rather than mass deportations of long-term undocumented residents. In other words, all they did was basically stop people from coming in. That was the bulk of their work. They didn't really deport people. But again, he ran on deporting 11 million people, just like he is now. Public and policy perception. Despite his rhetoric, Trump's administration did not fulfill the promise of deporting millions. This has been a point of critique from both his supporters, who expected more action, and his critics, who argue the policies were harsh but less effective than promised. Therefore, although there was a shift towards more aggressive rhetoric and policy on immigration, the actual execution in terms of mass deportations did not materialize to the extent of millions during Trump's first term. So, long story short, he ain't deliver. Period. The man did not deliver. All right, but what about his current promise? Well, let's take a look at what he has to say with that. Maybe. Let's try this.
On day one, I will seal the border and will begin the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. And if other countries say they won't take them back, we're not going to take them back. I will say that, yeah, here they come. You're just going to hold on to your britches, because here they come. They're coming back.
Wow. Okay. So when he tells Mexico, we're going to send you some violent Mexicans that have come across the border illegally, and Mexico says, "No, we don't want them," he's going to say, "Hold on to your britches." That's who we elected. We elected the guy that's going to say, "Hold on to." My grandparents used to say britches. Like I know this has nothing to do with immigration or anything, but dude, seriously, nobody says britches anymore. Come on, man. Like, how boomer can you really be? Anyway, beside the point. But will he follow through? Like 2016, Trump has a Republican-controlled Congress, but I'm not really expecting him to follow through. But still, we need to think through the idea of deporting millions of people, because a lot of people seem to want it. And I've been in arguments on social media with people about it. Now, number one, there is a monetary cost. It costs money for people to find them, collect them, process them, transport them. Presumably, through all of this, you've got to feed them, house them, clothe them, right? Like, there are a number of things that go into this. It's not just like you walk up to somebody, you snatch them up, you drive them to the border, and you kick them out, and it all can be done in whatever time it takes you to grab them and get to the border. It's more than that. And as we established in previous episodes, the government's not exactly good at doing things efficiently. I mean, we have a new department, not really a department per se, but we have this new entity called DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. Like, their job is to say, all right, let's go and find all the waste. Okay. That's because the government's really good at wasting money, not using it efficiently. And so, what's the priority here? Are they going to doge first? Or are they going to remove immigrants first? Well, if they doge first, number one, they might, if they do it well, they might actually have money. So like, hey, we've made these elements of government efficient. So therefore, now we have money to apply to this massive program because it's going to take a lot of money. Okay, well, that might work without raising, money, raising taxes and whatnot. But if they do that first, and he just said day one. So if they do that first, well, number one, they haven't secured money from other places where it's being used inefficiently. So where are they getting the new money? And then second, how do we know that this will be any more efficient than anything else that the government does? So in other words, let's say it takes, and I'm just going to make up a number. Let's say that it takes $10,000 on average to deport somebody. And that's the whole process. Seek them out, find out who they are, review the documentation, go grab them, go find them, grab them, house them, process them, transport them, get them, wherever they need to go. Like that whole process. Let's just say that it costs $10,000. Okay. And the real question is should it cost 5,000? Should it cost 2,000? Should it cost 1,000? How much should it cost? And how do we know that they're going to be efficient at it? Right? Like the cost is an issue because who bears that cost? Americans do. I do. You do. And non-legal non-residents. They do as well because they're working here and they're paying taxes as well. So anybody that's here that's paying taxes will have to pay for that. So how does this happen? What is the plan here to make sure that we don't burden ourselves with more tax issues? I don't hear one. I haven't seen one. Then we have the impact. Now this gets talked about a lot. And most of it is people saying stuff like, oh, how are you going to eat if we kick out all the agriculture workers? Well, for starters, super duper smart liberals, not every agricultural worker who happens to be Hispanic is also here illegally. I suspect that many of them are here legally, right? So let's not make assumptions that, oh, agriculture or construction, they're all illegal. Uh, my wife and I are in real estate. We have some real estate properties that we sometimes have worked on, and we've used presumably immigrants. And when I say presumably, like I didn't check into their background. We just check and say, do you have a legal business license and all that good stuff? And we only do that, as a matter of protecting ourselves financially and legally. But, so it's not like we're super worried like, oh my God, I can't hire an illegal immigrant. And nor do we go looking for them necessarily either, so it's possible that somebody flew under the radar. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of the people that we've used were here legally. And so, like, it's just a bad argument to mention. However, it's not entirely without merit. So, number one, you've got somewhere between 11 and 16 million illegal immigrants. I'm going to say that all of them cannot be violent criminals. And we're going to use a little bit of logic here. The reason I say that is because if you had 11 to 16 million people in this country who were all violent criminals, it wouldn't just be stories of Laken Riley or a police officer. It would be this person and this person and this person. Like we would pretty much all know somebody by name, somebody different, right? Not the same handful of names. If there were 11 to 16 million violent criminals that were illegal immigrants, we would have name after name after name after name. It would be a nightmare. It would be a disaster. It would be awful. And we would, because that's what violent criminals do. They commit violent acts. And when you have that many who happen to be illegal, you couldn't hide it. So just using a bit of logic, the fact that we only use a handful of names, and it's not to say there's only a handful of crimes. I'm just saying it's far fewer of the 11 to 16 million who are violent criminals, such to the point that it only produces a handful of notable names that we can recognize. But if there were more, then I'm going to say, logically speaking, we would have more to draw from. We'd have a larger pool of names to say, hey, this person was a victim of a violent crime. Now, again, I'm not trivializing and I'm not saying there aren't too many. One is one too many to begin with. And are there hundreds? There might be, right? But hundreds in a country of 300 some million, it's not really that many. So we end up focusing on a handful of names. Number two, regarding agriculture, construction, and stuff like that, there are illegal immigrants that are providing some level of service. Because if we've established that not all of them are violent criminals, then what are they? Are they just all sitting back collecting government paychecks? No, that's not it either. So they must be working. And again, we're just kind of walking through logically. So they're probably doing something. They're probably providing a service somewhere in this country. So if we remove 11 to 16 million people, let's just say that only half of them are actually working and providing a service, whether it's in construction, whether it's working in agriculture, working under the table at a mom and pop, shop or restaurant or what have you, or even in some small companies that are just kind of evading, kind of flying under the radar with who they hire, which has happened in the past. Even if it's only 5 million, imagine what would happen if all of a sudden 5 million workers are no longer working. Now, somebody is paying them to do something. Now, all of a sudden, that something is not getting done. And now you have 5 million empty spots. The other thing, like, and this is why I'm a little skeptical that he's going to do it anyway. Imagine the news after 5 million people. We're just going with this number just to make it simple. Imagine 5 million people lose their jobs because they were illegal immigrants and they got deported. Do you think the hostile media is going to differentiate in their jobs report? And when they report on jobs and whether or not the rate of employment is up or down. Do you think they're going to differentiate between U.S. citizens and not and illegal immigrants? No, they are not. And I'm sure that Trump already knows this. What they're going to do is they're going to be like, hey, unemployment just rose this high, blah, 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 right? And we're not even talking about, hey, what happens if we nab legal immigrants through this process, which we'll get to in just a moment. So I'm not sure that we actually are prepared as a country to remove 11 to 16 million illegal immigrants. It probably sounds nice to some people who are getting hyper focused on the Lake and Riley stories. But I think when it comes down to it, Americans simply won't have the stomach for it. I think we will end up seeing stories that don't make us feel good. And I think we're going to find out that, yes, a lot of these people, probably most of them, probably almost all of them, were in fact providing some service somewhere that we enjoyed. And then now that service has to be replaced, or, that person has to be replaced by somebody else, or that service goes unmet, or, whatever, like, prices go up because, whatever, like there's going to be some negative impact if this were to happen. So I'm not sure that we're actually ready. Now, he's talking about using the military, which I highly object to. And I agree with Rand Paul, who also objects. So let me pull up this article here from Rand Paul, and we'll take a look and see what it is that he had to say about this situation here. All right, so there it is, Newsmax. Senator Rand Paul to Newsmax: military should not be used for deportations. So now, a lot of libertarians were celebrating that Rand Paul is even getting on board with Trump. Cool, okay, fine. Well, he's also being a little critical. So are you on board with that too, there, libertarians who voted for Trump? Anyway, that's a different story. I'm not in favor of sending the army in uniforms into our cities to collect people, Paul said. That's not what we use our military for. We never have. And it's actually been illegal for over 100 years to bring the army into our cities. Paul underscored that the military's purpose is distinct from domestic law enforcement. Our army and our military are trained to shoot the enemy. They're not trained to get a warrant and do what they're doing, he said, adding that police have a difficult job, but the people removing people from our country need to be a police enforcement domestic agency, not the military. I'm not in favor of sending the army in uniforms into our cities to collect people. I think it's a terrible image. Okay, so I'm not nearly as worried about the image per se, but I am worried about what he said. The military isn't trained to do that. And how do I know? Because I was part of the military, and I was part of a when I was a young lad in 2002. I went to Bosnia. I deployed over to Bosnia, and if you know your history, Bosnia had a very terrible war, and then we got involved, and we had this force that was there as a what would they call it, um, a show of force. Yeah, we were there as a show of force with other nations, and we basically patrolled around and went on different missions and whatnot. Some of the missions were to go door to door and talking to people. Sometimes we'd even ask them if they had weapons that they wanted to give up. Don't skewer me, libertarians. I was a conservative then, so it was okay. But we did these kind of things. We also went through training when people were coming into base camp, how to go through and do, like a search and some other things like that. But we were ultimately not really trained. Like like as the military, we were trained in combat. We had very minimal training where it was non-combat to go to Bosnia explicitly. So if I hadn't, and what I'm saying here is, if I hadn't went to Bosnia, I would not have received the level of training necessary to act as an international police force. But even the training that I did receive was still, in my opinion, not what would be appropriate for here. So again, just so it's clear, regular military doesn't receive that training. The training that they do receive is specific to an area. So the military has not received training or an event or an area or whatnot. But so and it's still limited, and it's not what I would consider to be appropriate to go and round up 11 to 16 million immigrants. So I think that it's a bad idea, partially because you would be sending people that are trained in combat and have no police training whatsoever, or very limited police training, to go and try to round up people. And that's questionable whether we should be rounding them up in the first place. Now, that's one of my big concerns. But the real concern that I have is that US citizens might get deported. And you might go, "What, DL? Now you're talking crazy." But am I? I am not, because I did my research for you. So here's another video. This is Don Lemon back in 2010, 14 years ago. This is long before Trump, right? See, this is why I like going back historically. I like to go back and see what it is that we've that we've already seen play out. I think that gives us a good indication of the future. And so, and it also kind of gives us a good idea of the arguments that we're having today. Like in many cases, we're having the exact same argument that we had 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like literally the exact same argument. I mean, I just showed you that Trump, his rhetoric is the exact same from 2016 to 2014 or 2024, right? Like he hasn't changed. He's like, we're gonna take out all the bad people, all the, day one, we're gonna establish a task force of some sort. Back then it was a deportation force, which he abandoned because people didn't like the name of it. Now he's talking about using the military. Okay, but he was talking about, hey, we got to have bodies, we got to have a force to do this. And then back then he was talking about, hey, we're gonna go after the violent criminals, and then we're gonna kick out all the people that simply came over here without asking permission, and and they have to start over. Well, that's what he's saying today, right? Like, so he's saying the exact same things. So that's why I like going back. So let's listen to Don Lemon. It's a very quick clip here, and let's hear what he has to say about United States citizens being deported.
In 4 days, Arizona's new immigration law will go into effect. With police starting to enforce Arizona's new law next week, there is fear that a little-known problem will get worse. Americans getting deported. That's right, Americans getting deported. According to a Northwestern University researcher, every year hundreds of Americans are wrongfully forced out of the country.
hundreds of Americans every year. I want you to think about that. Hundreds every year, not like one every 5 years, hundreds every year. And this was in 2010. Now, immigration has long been controversial. It was controversial back when we had Ellis Island. You can go back and look up all the news. Every time that immigration is a major topic, it periodically is a major topic. Now, sometimes it takes a backseat to other things, but if you go back and you look in history, not deport, immigration has been an issue since forever. It's always an issue. Okay. But it wasn't an issue like it was today necessarily, where you have people saying, I've got this plan. We're going to build a wall. We're going to kick people out. We're going to make, another country pay for the wall. Like, we didn't have these grandiose ideas, but we still had this problem under what I might consider to be normal circumstances. And so, you know, and the really cool part about going back in the past here is that we can see some of these issues are real issues apart from the rhetoric today. Because what ends up happening sometimes is somebody like Donald Trump will come out and say, hey, I'm going to deport 11 million people. And then the media that doesn't like him, they'll go dig up a bunch of stories to kind of counter that narrative and be like, oh, see why this is a bad idea. So it's good to go back prior to that and say, okay, were these concerns a concern before it was popular, before you had somebody you didn't like to kind of conveniently make this concern? It's kind of like when somebody, and this happens all the time, you guys know this. It's like when somebody is getting ready to be appointed as a new Supreme Court justice, and they're going through the process. And then, somebody comes out and they're like, hey, 30 years ago, this man sexually assaulted me, right? Like we had that with Tim Walz. We had it with Supreme Court justices, right? Like this happens all the time. Conveniently, somebody comes out of the woodwork from like 20, 30 years prior, and they're like, oh yeah, here's this issue. And I finally felt compelled to speak up conveniently right now. Right. So this happens all the time. So it's good to go back in history and say, okay, the concerns that we have today, were they ever a concern before, or are they only now a concern now that we've got somebody that's doing something or saying they're going to do something we don't like? So that's the value add in going back and using this 2010 clip from Don Lemon. So here's what the new borders are that Trump said in response to that. So this is Tim Holman, and he says,
are you planning on deporting American citizens?
No, exactly not. Look.
Okay, so he like laughed. He's like, "Are you going to deport Americans?" He's like, "Come on, really? Exactly not." Which is a weird way to respond, but exactly not. But that's his initial answer. But let's continue listening.
It's like Island of Misfit Toys. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. President Trump has made it clear. We will prioritize public safety threats and national security threats first.
Okay, so once again, exactly what was said in 2015, 2016.
And that's what the focus will be. And there's over 1.5 convicted criminal aliens in this country with final orders removal that we're going to be looking for.
Okay, again, same rhetoric as 2015, 2016. Somehow they're still here.
There's thousands of gang members, illegal gang members we're going to be looking for. Now, I'm going to say, if you're in the country illegally, you shouldn't feel comfortable. Absolutely not. I won't feel comfortable if I'm in the country illegally. If I'm in some other country illegally, I'm not going to be comfortable. You shouldn't be comfortable either, because when you enter this country illegally, you have committed a crime. You are a criminal, and you're not off the table.
All right. So there you have it. He said, we're not going to do it, which would make sense, because if they said we're going to deport American citizens too, we would probably riot in the streets. Rightfully so. However, the problem is not whether they intend to do it, but whether they accidentally do it. So I want to show you, where is, oh yeah, this. So let me show you here. Where did it go? Here we are. So let me show you some headlines from long ago on being accidentally deported. So let's play this. There we go. There's a headline. All right. So the first one says, from the Charlotte Observer, North Carolina, native wrongly deported to Mexico. This is in August of 2009. All right. Got another one. ICE. This is from the American Civil Liberties Union, 2010. ICE deports non-Spanish speaking American citizen. All right. Let's see. American Civil ACLU again. U.S. citizen wrongfully deported to Mexico, settles his case. That's Mark Little. That was in 2012. Okay, so I believe that was the same guy. If you go back 2010 to 2012. So it took 2 years to resolve this. Might have been more. Again, from the ACLU, yes, the U.S. wrongfully deports its own citizens. 2013, although no exact numbers exist, ICE regularly detains and deports U.S. citizens without ever providing them with a lawyer. If you're into the law, you know that due process is a big thing. Yet, if they determine that you're an illegal immigrant, you don't get due process in the way that is provided an American citizen. They deny it all the time. And so if you get caught in the dragnet, well, that's tough for you, isn't it? All right, American teen from CNN. This is 2012. American teen mistakenly deported to Colombia returns. A teenager. We deported a teenager to Colombia. All right, NBC News 2020. U.S. citizen mistakenly put in deportation proceedings. Right? These are all over the place. 2019 from Truth Dig. Thousands of U.S. citizens have been mistakenly deported. Okay, now remember, Don Lemon reported in 2010 that it was determined by researchers that hundreds were deported every year, hundreds annually. This is from ICE. Former naturalized citizen deported to Jordan, 2023. That's ICE reporting. This is not even like it's not like some blogger who doesn't know what he's talking about. It's literally ICE. All right, let's see what we got here. The World from PRX. I'm not familiar with that, but it came up in my Google search when the government wrongfully deports people, right? And so it talks about somebody who spent over 2 years, about 2 years dealing with this issue. So I want you to imagine that you're a United States citizen. The government decides you're an illegal immigrant, and you have to spend the next 2 years fighting just to be in the country for which you are a lawful citizen of. Right? That's a big deal, in my opinion. Not something that we can just be like, it's no big deal. NPR, U.S. citizens have been accidentally caught up in and this is from a controversial border crackdown in Texas known as Operation Lone Star, but it wrongfully targeted U.S. citizens, right? The states do it. The federal government does it. Everybody's doing it. Like government's like, hey, we're going to deport people. And then they end up deporting the wrong people. LA Times, how a U.S. citizen was mistakenly targeted for deportation, 2017. When Sergio Carrillo was arrested by immigration enforcement officers last year, he figured the mistake would be cleared up quickly. Now, just from that byline, you're like, okay, it apparently wasn't, right? Like that's how they lead into this. Let's see. From the New Yorker, when ICE tries to deport Americans, who defends them? Steve Cole on naturalized American citizens and permanent residents who get mistakenly caught up in deportation proceedings. This is 2018. Like these news articles all over the place. You can find them. San Francisco Chronicle, U.S. citizen mistakenly targeted for deportation, returns home. This is the Cambodian one, I believe, written in 2020. Last one. Vice, the U.S. keeps mistakenly deporting its own citizens. Thousands of citizens have been unlawfully deported or detained by ICE in recent years, according to extensive research undertaken by Jacqueline Stevens, 2016. This is a real problem. And we don't have a massive program explicitly looking for 11 to 16 million people. This is under what you might consider to be normal circumstances. Normal circumstances, we're deporting hundreds every year, or at least putting them in the process and making them have to fight and prove to the government. And if you dig into some of these stories, you're going to find that some of them, when it's reported later, they provided the authorities the documentation. They were like, here is the evidence. Here's my birth certificate. Here is my, whatever, my social security card and all these. They provided information and it was just ignored. And they're like, no, you're faking it. Because there is such a thing as people claiming to be citizens fraudulently. So what they do is once they determine that you are an illegal immigrant, the bar for you to prove otherwise is like much higher. It's not the same as if you went to the bank and they're like, can you prove, or, some organization, and you're seeking something and they're like, all right, validate that you're a US citizen, right? Like if you go to get a job and they're like, hey, are you a US citizen? Yes. Can you prove it? Yes. Where's your documentation? Like that's a very low bar. It's relatively easy. But once the government has determined that you might be an illegal immigrant, the bar for you goes up. It's not as simple necessarily. It's just showing your documentation. And if you read some of the stories, it's heart wrenching because you're like, wow, this is what we did to our own country, our own countrymen. Now, you guys know my wife is a naturalized citizen from Indonesia. Now, I'm not particularly worried because we have resources to fight if it comes up. And my wife has a long record as a green card holder and now a naturalized citizen with major companies. So I feel like we're in a safe place. Okay. The other thing is that she's from Indonesia, which is not one of the countries that tends to get floated around in the immigration debate. If she were from like one of the South American countries or a Central American country, then I might be a little bit more concerned. But because she's from a country that like nobody ever talks about, I feel a little bit more confident that she's not going to get caught up in the dragnet if it actually plays out. However, I want to play something to you for you. And this comes from, remember the debate that Spike Cohen had with David Hogg? It was the gun debate. Well, there was an interesting question by Lily Tang Williams. I'm going to play that clip for you real quick because I think it bears a lot of relevance to this particular conversation. So that's video number 5. So let's play that here really quickly.
My name is Lily Tang Williams. Welcome to my live free or die state. Actually, I am a Chinese immigrant who survived communism. And under Mao, 40 million people were starving to death after he sold the communism to them. And 20 million people died, murdered during his Cultural Revolution. So my question to you, David, is that can you guarantee me, a gun owner tonight, our government in the US, in DC, will never become a tyrannical government? Can you guarantee that to me?
There's no way I can ever guarantee that any government will not be tyrannical.
Well, then the debate on gun control is over because I will never give up my guns. Never.
All right. So she said, look, can you guarantee that government won't be tyrannical with further gun control? And he's like, no, I can't. She says, well, good. The debate's over. Well, in the same vein, for those who are like, yeah, we gotta deport millions and millions of people. If you cannot guarantee that my wife or others who are American citizens will not get caught in the dragnet, then the debate is over. Not interested in having it with you. Because if you're going to say America first, that means American citizens get priority on everything, not just the thing that you think is bothersome. Not just, oh, they're coming over here to take our jobs. No, it's not. That's not just America first. America first includes Americans not being accidentally, wrongfully targeted and having to fight for their own, to live in their own country. So if you can't guarantee it, done. Conversation over. Period. And I got stronger words than that, but we'll refrain. Be nice today. But that does bring up a question. What is the answer? Because we do have an issue, right? We have, like I talked about it yesterday, we have the asylum seekers. They're coming over and they're becoming more and more and more. And we had the Remain in Mexico Act, and that was problematic. We do have violent criminals in this country. We do have immigrants here in this country who are not here legally, right? And when I say that's a problem, that means we just need to deal with it somehow. How do we deal with that? Well, do we just necessarily wave a magic wand and say, all right, if you're in this country, you're free to go, no big deal, whatever? Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I think we can get some advice from the founder of the Libertarian Party, David Nolan. Because as it turns out, in 2010, he ran against John McCain for Senate, and he was asked about the immigration issue, about border walls and all that. He was asked, because again, this is not a new problem. right? Same old problem. Same problem 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. When we had Ellis Island, there were complaints about the immigration, right? It's always been a problem. So let's hear what David Nolan has to say and see if maybe he can give us some insight, right? If you're a libertarian, this should appeal to you, I would hope. So let's see what he says.
Mr. Nolan, you have warned Americans the zeal for secure borders must not be used as an excuse leading to an erosion of civil liberties and a backdoor to a national ID program. How do you balance securing the border with protecting civil liberties?
That's an excellent question. As a libertarian, I believe civil liberties should always be protected. I think often in times of trouble, this country has a tendency to overreact to the crisis of the day.
Hey, anybody that lived through COVID, just ask yourself, did we overreact during COVID? That was the latest crisis of the day. Did Mr. Nolan, did he basically predict how we would behave when COVID-19 hit? Yes, he did. Why? Because this is consistent human behavior that happens repeatedly. All right.
Much of the problem on our national borders, I believe, stems from the fact that we have made it far too difficult for well-intentioned, good, honest people to get into this country.
Okay. So he's talking about what I mentioned yesterday. I said, what are people doing when they come to this country? If somebody, just ask anybody who has strong feelings on immigration, just ask them and say, look, if somebody comes here, we'll disregard legal or illegal. Just if somebody comes here and they're being a productive citizen, they learn the language at least enough, they provide a service, maybe they're helping, build houses, maybe they're doing agriculture, maybe they find some other kind of work. Is that the kind of person that you want here? The answer, if people aren't going to give you too hard of a time and object and be like, well, do they come here legally or illegally? The answer is that is who we want. We want productive members of society, people that will come here and they will find a job and hopefully do well for themselves and not be on welfare, not be criminals, like serious major violent criminals, right? Like that's our big goal. So I think he's correct here. Let's continue.
We need to make it far easier for people who wish to come here to work, to raise a family, to start a business, and at the same time, make it more difficult for people with bad intentions. If we allowed in the 95% plus who are good, honest people to come here with minimum paperwork and minimum hassle, you could then presume that the people trying to get across the border illicitly were there for bad purposes. After all, if they were here for good purposes and could prove that they were not terrorists, that they were not laden with communicable diseases, that they were not criminals, we could assume that the remaining small handful sneaking across the border at night were here for bad purposes, and it would be far easier for the National Guard or whomever we wanted to station on the border to intercept them. I do not believe we need to build a large, expensive wall. Americans should always remember that big walls are often used to keep people in as well as out. And if America ever turns fascist, we don't want to be in a big, giant prison.
Well, that's kind of wild. Anybody remember the Berlin Wall? Oh, yeah. What was that built for? To keep people in. And you know what they did when people tried to escape? They shot them. Go on YouTube, look it up. You can find stories where somebody tried to escape and the guards were given permission that they didn't even have to seek an official order. If somebody was trying to climb the wall to get out, you were allowed to shoot on sight. So keep that in mind. He's correct. You put a big, huge wall, that means it's going to be harder for us to get out if the country ever turns fascist. Now, more than just that, I think he's correct. We want to minimize the effort for people that want to come here and be productive members. So, and he basically outlines what I said yesterday. My view of immigration is in line with David Nolan, the founder of the party, the Libertarian Party. And I'm saying this very explicitly because my libertarian audience members know that we're having a big shakeup right now. There's a lot of libertarians that are supporting Trump. A lot of them support his immigration plans. They're like, we need to get rid of him. We need to build a wall. We need to secure our borders. Well, here, let me tell you something plain and clear so that you do not mistake this. If you are a libertarian and you support a border wall and deporting millions of people, you are in line with John effing McCain, because that is who David Nolan in 2010 was running against. And if you go back and you watch that episode, that debate, you will find that the answer that John McCain gave right after that, he said, well, he basically said, I disagree with you. We need all these things. All these things were things that Trump was talking about, or that Trump is talking about today. So if you support deportation, if you support a border wall, you are John McCain. If you oppose those things and you think that we should streamline the process so that people that want to come here and be productive members of society and allow us to free up resources to deal with people that want to come here and not be productive members of society, then you are more in line with the Libertarian Party founder. Also, I think you happen to be a little bit more on the logical side because you recognize the inherent danger of putting up a wall and deporting millions of people. Now, for those ultra concerned about immigrants crossing here illegally, the ones that come here and that's their only crime, because I would assume out of the 11 to 16 million that a good, like Mr. Nolan said, 95% of them are probably the only crime that they have committed is not getting permission to come across. That's their crime. Okay. They haven't committed any other crimes, or maybe the crimes are very, very minimal. Like, they're driving without a license, something like that, but they're not committing violent crimes, right? Like most of them are not committing violent crimes. So for those that are concerned about them, number one, I want you to think about this. There's books been written about them. It's been said that the average American commits 3 felonies a day. Like if you're an American, you have probably committed 3 felonies a day. Okay. So maybe a little humility on your part. Because if you want to raise your fist and scream and yell and be like, oh, they came over here illegally. Okay. What about all the Americans that are committing 3 felonies a day? Is that important to you or not? Because really what you're trying to do is you're just justifying your dislike of other people. You don't really care about crime. Come on, quit bullshitting us. We all know. If you're worried about this person who committed this minor crime, but you're not worried about these other people that have committed presumably more significant crimes, then you're just picking and choosing based on the person. You don't care about rule of order or law and order. That's not your concern. Your concern is just trying to find an answer to support whatever dumb narrative that you're trying to support. And then I also want you to consider this, that while single crimes, I'm trying to look at my notes here. Yeah. So that single crime is worse than many minor crimes that Americans commit daily. Okay. No, sorry, I said that wrong. This is what happens when I write notes. Sometimes I scribble things down and I'm like, wait a minute, what did I mean by that? Okay. So that single crime, I want you to consider, is that really worse than the many minor crimes that Americans commit all the time? So I want you to think about things. We speed all the time. People drive without a license. We don't pay our taxes and so on. Okay. So if we're worried about crime, if somebody comes over here and they otherwise don't commit any other crimes, all they're doing is crossing the border without permission. Is that crime actually any worse than some of the ones that Americans do on a daily basis? The minor ones. We're not talking about the felonies, some of which probably shouldn't be felonies. We're talking about the minor ones. So in reality, they're not that different from us. They're not. In fact, you might even argue if that's their only crime, they're better than some Americans. Why? Because think of the reason that they're committing that crime. If they're leaving their country because it's dangerous, because they're impoverished, and they're like, I'm going to go to America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, where there's ample opportunities to be successful or at least just live a peaceful life. And their crime is coming across a border without permission. Think about the goal that they had in mind. They're trying to make a better life, which means by doing so, they're going to make life better for those around them. If I come to your country because I want a better life, part of me having a better life means that I'm doing things that would make your life better. Maybe I engage in some sort of work that you benefit from. Maybe I start a company that somebody that you or somebody you know gets hired to, right? That's what it means to have a better life. And I would argue that is much more if we're looking at the rationale for committing a crime. I would say that is more moral than speeding down the road because you couldn't get your ass out of bed on time and leave at a time to get yourself to work on time. You're endangering people around you by speeding, however little or much, but you're endangering people because you were too lazy to be ready on time. So if you're speeding to get somewhere because you're late, I think that's less justifiable than crossing a border so that you can have a better life, which would improve the lives of people around you. So I think that Americans need to be a lot more humble about this whole immigration process. All right, let's get to some comments here because we're a little bit past time here. So let's see. Let's pull up some comments here. And we're going to go back a little bit because I didn't keep up with them. So Time Surfing Alien says, overreact. You mean like take the guns first, due process later? Maybe. And then he follows up, or I don't know if he followed up. This might have been a prior comment. Last I checked, Trump is willing to suspend constitutional rights. He is. I mean, he did say that he wanted to take the guns first, due process later. And it shocked people. Go back and look at the news. People were like, wait, what? Like the people around him, they were like, whoa, hold on. We can't, we gotta keep with due process. And he's like, yeah, do we? Right. So he's not a friend of due process. All right, let's see what else we got here. Very important announcement here. That Liberty lady has pointed out that she asked, is it true that you will be on the Black Powder podcast tonight at 9 p.m.? It is in fact true. I will be there. And I hope to see you there. And I'm going to stay up late and then I'll be back again in the morning. But yes, tonight I will be on the Black Powder podcast. I will make sure, if you're following me on Twitter, Liberty Dad Pod, on Twitter, I will make sure to retweet, the live stream. I will tweet out the links and all that good stuff. If you're following me on Facebook, I'll do the same thing. And if there's an opportunity to stream it to my channels, I will do that as well. So, just wherever you're following me, keep an eye out. I will have that information posted. Or if you're following the Black Powder podcast already, then go ahead and just keep an eye on their stream. I will be on it tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, let's see. What other comments do we have in here? You're going to have, you guys get me sometimes. Keith says, but DL, I had to stay up late to defeat the Krill Empire. I apologize that I don't know what the Krill Empire is. I'm sure if you told me, I'm going to go, oh yeah, that's right. But at 8:50 in the morning, I'm a little not sure. Anyway, I got to get to this closing, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel at youtube.libertydad.com. Or if you prefer, you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.